I get it. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Good evening. It is my pleasure to call to order the February 23rd, 2023 Curriculum and Pupil Services Committee of the School District of Haverford Township. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Now we'll turn it over to Ms. Jen Sachs, our Assistant Superintendent, to walk us through the agenda.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Wiedemann. Good evening. Thank you all for being here. We have 3 items on our agenda this evening. Our first is the school counseling plan. This plan is required by the state. It's a K-12 school counseling plan. And I will say, I'm going to introduce our 3 of our school counselors who are going to present the plan that they have put together. I just want to acknowledge that what is required by the state is certainly completed, but our school counselors really go above and beyond anything that the state is asking of them. And in assembling the state plan and putting that together, they have taken a very thorough look at their programs, their services, everything that they offer, K through 12, how they support students in general, how they support groups, how they support individuals, how that programming meets career standards, social emotional standards, academic standards. It is the work that you see reflected and posted and that we're going to talk through this evening is comprehensive, but the state doesn't even ask all the questions that we can answer. So I do want to recognize the leadership that the folks that you see in the room and they're going to share with you tonight have taken in creating the plan and in enacting and maintaining the services and the programs. So I will introduce Catherine Malum, who is our school counseling department co-chair for elementary, Lindsay Hughes, who is our school counseling department chair for secondary, and Amy Alderfer, who is here representing our high school counselors as well. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Great, thank you very much, Jen, and good evening to everyone. So what you're going to see here is the abbreviated version, but an overall view of what our program is, and we're going to kind of walk you through the various components, give you a sense of what we've been working on all these months that tries to capture the incredible scope and depth of our K-12 program. So I will ask Lindsay to kind of take you through a little bit what the plan requirements were.
Sorry, are we doing the slideshow up there or
yeah.
just?
Yeah, there we go.
First time.
There we
go. All
And
right.
it goes kind of fast. So there you go.
Yeah,
You got
so
it.
here you can see the different components that the state actually requests from this K-12 plan. So our plan has to be updated every 3 years. So this current one that we're updating is for 2023 to 2026. All of these aspects and components are addressed in our plan and more. Tonight, we are not going to go through all different components, but kind of highlight some of the things that really showcase what we do day in and day out as a counseling team throughout all the different grade levels.
So the plan required us to develop a school counseling mission statement, and we haven't had one prior to that. And it was actually a really helpful exercise for us to begin to think about how we represent what we do in words and aligned with the school district's mission. So we don't intend to read every slide to you, but I think this one is worth thinking about the words that represent what we do and our commitment to our students and to the mission of this school district. The mission of the school district of Haverford Township School Counseling Program is to provide a comprehensive developmental K-12 program designed to meet the academic, career, personal, and social emotional needs of all students. School counselors strengthen our school community by advocating for and promoting an inclusive and safe learning environment and supporting the school district's strategic goals of social emotional wellness, diversity and inclusion, and preparing contemporary citizens. in partnership with other educators, students and their families, local businesses and agencies, and post-secondary institutions. Haverford school counselors are committed to providing equity and access for all students to equip them with the skills necessary to become productive, responsible members of a diverse global society. Here's our elementary school counseling team. And I just want to note that we have added 3 additional counselors to our program this year, thanks to the board and Dr. Rushi, Ms. Saxa, who have supported the work. And I can tell you firsthand that has been an unbelievable benefit to our elementary students. We have cut our caseloads in half in 3 of the schools that did not have 2 counselors. And so now students are being able to access their counselors more quickly. We're able to be more responsive, and we're also able to be more reactive. At our secondary level, we have included Nancy Naylor, who is our developmental guidance teacher in 6th grade. And if you look at our whole list, now K-12, we have 22 full-time counselors in our K-12 program, which is really wonderful. Never enough, of course, but really an exceptional example of the commitment that this school district has to our counseling program. So again, one of the benefits of really looking at this plan and looking at the way the state would like us to think about the role of a school counselor is it's not simply to provide counseling and consultation and to teach social and emotional wellness, but that counselors are leaders, advocates, collaborators, and agents of systemic change. And I want to give you a few examples of the kinds of things that we do within each one of those 4 components. As leaders, we design and implement a comprehensive K-12 counseling program. We serve as members of crisis teams, and we lead when needed. We lead 504, interagency, student attendance improvement meetings, and parent-teacher meetings. We provide consultation to teachers to help students succeed, and we coordinate parent and student and school-wide programs to support school climate and students' wellness and mental health. As advocates, which is primarily what we are the voice of the child. We are advocates for students. We advocate for students at student-focused meetings. We provide recommendations to parents, guardians, educators, and outside providers. We promote equitable access for all students. And at the high school level, we advocate for students in pursuit of their post-secondary plans through letters of recommendation. As collaborators, school counselors serve on school-based and district committees and teams. We work with others to implement preventative strategies and provide early identification and intervention for students' academic, social, and emotional needs. We collaborate with outside mental health providers and with post-secondary institutions and community and business partners for students' post-secondary plans. And as agents of systemic change, counselors identify and work to remove barriers to student success. We promote programs, policies, and best practices for all students. We serve on school-based or district equity and school leadership teams, and we develop and assist in programs to promote equity. So we're going to get into now some of the smaller components, I guess you would say, of our plan. And when you see the entire plan, you'll notice there's a whole calendar from August through June of the roles, functions, responsibilities of our school counselors K-12. So I'll focus here on elementary. Broken down into the 3 components, academic, career, and social and emotional. These are the primary areas of focus for program delivery across grades, and these are the typical components. Now, for what you see on the screen, on the slide, you'll notice that many of these are ongoing roles and responsibilities of counselors, and then there are going to be some variations depending on the part of the school year that we're in and the specific needs that our students have at those times. For example, at the end of the school year, we at the elementary level are preparing for our 5th grade transitions, and we are providing, especially at the beginning of the school year, support for our new students. We also have expanded the elementary level this past last academic year, which you've heard some about and hopefully seen. That part of our social emotional component is really reaching out to families through the Counselors Connection newsletter, so that we are really not only promoting what our program teaches, but hopefully providing some good resources and some information to our families.
Okay, so you'll see here at the middle school level that a lot of our roles are similar to the elementary level. We do a lot of the same things, but just gear it towards the middle school age students. So we serve on a lot of different teams in order to make sure that we are advocating for our students and making sure that they have access to education and access to supports that are needed for them as and their learning styles. Throughout the year, we advocate for our students and get them involved in clubs and activities. We can coordinate with those club sponsors, the sports sponsors, to ensure that these students are engaged in school activities as much as possible. We have, and we'll get into this when we go into our curriculum piece, but we coordinate daily social emotional wellness lessons through an advisory period. We have a 6th grade developmental guidance class that our 6th graders take all year. We coordinate and implement 3 wellness days, school-wide wellness days. And we spend a lot of our time building rapport with our students, meeting their needs, being proactive and reactive based on the ongoing concerns. We address crisis intervention as needed. Attendance management is another big piece of our role in connecting with students and with families.
And similarly to how Catherine and Lindsay expressed the ongoing activities that we do sort of the same thing at the high school, but attending meetings, supporting students, helping provide access. But things look a little different at the high school. For our older students, we do have advisory where we're talking with students about post-high school planning or upcoming events and opportunities, things that they need to be planning for in the future. Our career readiness is specific lessons that we do within the classroom, and those happen at certain times of the year. Sometimes through English classes, sometimes through science classes, and we coordinate with the teachers. We do, for social emotional, we do a school-wide wellness days. We're at 2 now this year. I think there will be at least 1 more, which has been wonderful. And those all happen at one time for the whole school. We do our program in various formats. So we'd have whole school activities like the wellness days. We also have a college and career fair. We also do, we take our seniors, our juniors on a college road trip, helping provide equity and access for all students to get to do a college tour. We have colleges that come in and meet with students so that they can, if they're not able to get to a college to visit, they can meet with a rep at the high school. We do classroom lessons, and we, of course, meet with students individually and in small groups. We meet with students and parents. We also provide some representatives to come in and speak with students about post-high school planning as well.
So in addition to the responsiveness of our roles in terms of providing individual and school counseling with students and addressing all sorts of referrals that come to us from parents, from teachers, and from students themselves, we have our curriculum piece across our K-12 program. At the elementary level, and some of you have heard me say this before, but I'm going to continue to say it, this is a unique program in this area, that every single elementary student has a 30-minute SEL lesson taught by their school counselor. So that is 100+ lessons over their elementary career. Students get to know their counselors. Counselors get to know every single student. And this year, with the addition of the 3 elementary counselors, we are able to get into all kindergartens every other week, which we had not previously been able to do at the larger schools. So at our elementary level, we have the bi-weekly SEL program taught by our school counselors for all of our kids, grades K-5, 30 minutes every other week and 20 lessons per year. Our curriculum is developmental, child-centered. It focuses on the CASEL 5, the interrelated set of cognitive, affective, and behavioral competencies, and our units now are aligned with the 5. So self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And within that, we will start at the very core level with our younger children, teaching them about how to identify feelings, and then we build on that over their 6 years. So they might be learning about the word frustrated when they're younger, and then in the upper grades, they're learning more about how to really be precise with their feelings vocabulary and learn strategies for how to handle those feelings. We might start in a younger grade learning about how to make friends, and then we're getting into pretty specific details about empathy and how to be a good friend, how to recognize the characteristics of a healthy or unhealthy friendship. We might start in our younger grades and identify the difference between teasing and bullying. But then in 4th grade, we're doing an in-depth study of bullying and types of bullying and strategies for handling and preventing bullying, and how to be an upstander and an ally instead of a bystander. So these lessons build on themselves, and we really see over that time how students' skills develop as they go through the lessons. And our lessons are aligned not only with ASCA's mindsets and behaviors, but also the PA career standards.
So at the middle school, it obviously looks a little bit different. Our 6th graders, as I mentioned before, they have access to the 6th grade developmental guidance class. They have a curriculum that builds on what the students have learned in their elementary school SEL classes, which is amazing. And the fact that we have a 6th grade developmental guidance class is great. I don't think that that's something that's offered in a lot of middle schools. We're really proud to have that as part of our middle school curriculum. You can see up there some of the umbrella topics that are addressed. When kids ask questions like what is developmental guidance, they call it DevGo. We like to say it's like surviving middle school 101. How to be a good person, how to make it through, and kind of become a productive member of society. On top of that, as I mentioned, we have school-wide wellness days. We've had 3 so far this year. We're looking to add another one in May. This takes a lot of effort from our staff and from our students. We've gotten a lot of really positive feedback. This year, our first wellness day focused on gratitude, restorative practices, and then brain development. Our next one focused on self-care and community building, and then the last one was inclusion and community building. So it gives the students a chance to kind of choose their path. They connect with different students across grade levels in hopes to kind of build that community within our middle school. We also have our daily social emotional wellness activities during our advisory time, which is 15 minutes after lunch every day. We do it 4 days a week. We have monthly focuses. So this month, a lot of our topics are Black History Month oriented. And then within these month focuses, we also incorporate movement, mindfulness, organization, and connection with peers. So it's kind of like a midday emotional support time. We are also doing an 8th grade career day this year. We were doing it a little while ago, and then COVID made things a little complicated. So we're really excited to get that back up and running this year. Our kids get to make a choice about different topics, different careers that they might be interested in. We have members from the community that are going to come in and speak to our students. And then for career lessons, our students access their career lessons in their infotech classes, which they take on a quarterly basis. In the 6th grade infotech class, they do a learning style inventory, and then they complete a reflection based on the results of that inventory. In 7th grade, they do a career cluster finder and then reflection afterwards, and then they do a strengths explorer and reflection in 8th grade. And then throughout all 3 years, they complete an academic career plan. The career plan is located on Google Drive. The other inventories are on Naviance, which they begin really heavily using in high school. So we've, in the past couple of years, been excited to be able to get them acclimated to Naviance earlier. The academic career plan gives them an opportunity to take some of the things that they learn throughout these inventories and kind of guide their interests and put it all on paper, and then they revisit it. So they start it in 6th grade, they revisit and update in 7th grade, and revisit and update in 8th grade.
And at the high school, we do use Naviance a lot. So we do a lot of our career readiness, our post-high school planning, all of our activities are through Naviance. So we start in 9th grade doing sort of a skills assessment with the 9th graders so that they can sort of learn what their strengths and weaknesses are and maybe match some careers to those skills and interests. They do a reflection to come up with an idea, and they can add careers to their career clusters in Naviance. And then we also give them some training on just how Naviance works at the high school, because it really does become a resource for them for all of their post-high school planning. And it's also what we use when we're sending their transcripts and information to colleges. In 10th grade, we again we introduce them to DCTS, and we do a presentation, a whole group presentation from the tech school, and giving students information and access to other opportunities that may be outside of the high school. And then we also do a resume writing workshop with them, which I think is really valuable. And it's amazing that Naviance can house that right in there. They can go back to that at any time, and they can modify it. They can, they can create a new one. They can add to it. That's something that they can use for jobs or when they're applying to college. We do also start them working on documenting their activities and talking about the school activity work balance, making sure that they're well-rounded and not putting too much on themselves. In 11th grade, we do a personality assessment. So we go back and we look a little bit more at the skills from 9th grade, and then we go to the personality and we expand a little bit more, looking to see what has changed. Are some of those careers still showing up? Are there different careers? Are there things that match? Adding those to their profile. And then we also have the college and career fair in 11th grade, where they can sort of explore and go and talk to colleges about potential majors, about potential opportunities. We meet with students in whole group, individual, and in their advisories about meetings for post-high school planning. We talk about what the post-high school planning process is going to be. And then in 12th grade, we sort of are helping them hone in on what they want to study, trying to find colleges that have what they want, that meet their interests. We do classroom presentations. We do a parent night on the whole process of applying to college. And then we do individual student meetings as well.
So now we're going to take a look at the program goals, and each level was asked to identify academic, career, and personal social goals. So we don't expect you to see this slide too well, but we're going to kind of capture the goals and how they would be measured at each level. At the elementary level, the counselors chose to address unexcused latenesses to school because of its impact on not only academic progress, but on the way that students start their day when they are chronically late. Not only do they miss their morning meeting time and that time to really come together as a class, as a community, but also for a lot of kids, it causes them anxiety to be walking in late or to miss the first part of their day. So we identified that we will look at baseline data this year, and then we will work to decrease unexcused student tardiness by 15% over the next year, and then look again at the goal at the end of next year. For our career goal, the state actually has our career goals with us. So we have, in third grade, the students start a career portfolio in Google Drive that then they keep until they switch over to Naviance in the middle school. So students are asked to have 2 pieces of career evidence in third grade, 2 in fourth grade, and 2 in fifth grade, for a total of 6 by the time they leave fifth grade. And our career lessons focus, for example, on entrepreneurship in third and fourth grade. We do some beginning interest inventories with our fourth and fifth graders, and we actually have our fifth graders write a very first resume, which I think it'll be fun for them to look back on someday. And for personal social, we are focusing on emotional awareness, being able to identify feelings. That is measured through our worksheets that we do throughout our lessons and exit tickets to be able to see that our students can identify different feelings, express their feelings through our SEL lessons. So those are the elementary program goals.
Okay, so similarly for middle school, we chose to address attendance for the academic. Our focus is more on full day academic or full day attendance due to, a recent increase in truancy court referrals and truancy prevention programs. We would like to see a decrease in referrals to those programs and specifically see a decrease in steps taken after an attendance improvement plan meeting is held with the counselor. So we are looking to, by the end of the 2025, this plan that ends 2025-2026 school year, we were hoping to see a 10% reduction. So we would check that data at the end of every school year, and we can pull that from our Power School reports. Career-wise, again, the state has already chosen our goal for us, so they made it easy. Our students have 2 pieces of evidence that they are required to do each year, and that's what I was speaking about earlier, the learning style inventory, the academic career plan, the strengths explorer, and the career cluster finder. So by the end of 8th grade, they should have all 6 of those things completed. Now, for us, they are partially in Google Drive and partially in Naviance at this point. And then our personal social goal, we would like to see an increase in awareness of positive coping strategies through use of our school-wide wellness days. So we're hopeful that through an exit ticket that these students are able to identify multiple positive coping strategies that they can utilize when things get difficult.
At the high school, we chose to look at the Act 158 graduation pathways. So our goal is to decrease the number of students that are using their IEP and waiver as a graduation pathway and increase the use of the other pathways. So we are hoping to increase that by 15%, which I think is a really attainable goal, especially considering we're just at our baseline data right now. So we are looking forward to working with students, and I think this will help us really engage and learn more about what the students are planning to do in the future. Again, our career plan is much like we've already said. We do all of our 8 pieces of evidence through Naviance. students' assessments, reflections, exit tickets for their college road trip, for their career fair, their resume, and we keep all of that data in Naviance, so we're able to see the percentage of students who are completing that. And then our personal social, we are looking at doing more wellness days and increasing students' coping strategies, learning different ways that they can use, much like the middle school, things that they can use when they're having a tough day or when they need to relax or de-stress, giving them some good coping skills.
So there you have the abbreviated version of our plan, and we're happy to answer questions, but Ms. Saxa, you'd like to talk about the next steps?
Yes, just so the board is clear, sort of how the operationally this should occur next is at our next school board meeting. Usually it's Dr. Christian, but yes, great. We'll give a board report, a thorough, if history serves as any guide, board report regarding the plan and what was presented this evening, and then we will ask on the 16th, which is 2 meetings from now, for the board to approve the plan. It is due to the state by the end of March. So our hope is that that gives you enough time to ask questions and, share any thoughts that you have, and you would feel prepared to vote on it at that meeting. And then once it's voted on, if it is approved, we can go ahead and submit it to PDE. And, sometimes they'll have a comment or two or a question that they'll send back to us. If that's the case, we'll be happy to answer it, and we will enact our plan from there. I just want to mention, just as an example, the goals that we just went over, the last 3 slides there that we just went over, they didn't have to be in that format for the plan. The plan just said, can you outline some goals? And our school counseling team wanted to make sure that they were SMART goals, and they were measurable, they were attainable, they were based on data, they were rooted in what their mission is. So that's just one example of making sure that we're not only doing the job that's required, but our school counselors are doing the job that they believe is important to do. And I think we all know, we continue to read in the news about the challenges that our students are facing academically, socially, emotionally, personally, all of those things. And, this work is so important. So I am thankful to you for putting together the scope of the work that you have for us this evening.
I just want to say, just really quickly, thank you so much for putting this together. It is really thorough. Our guidance program, I think, is just really a beacon of our school. I mean, it's really something that you all should be proud of, that I am proud of to have at Haverford. And one point that I really appreciate in the plan is that, we talk a lot about being reactive and having the resources to react when a student is having a problem. But, the fact that you all, the counselors, are in the school or in the classes every day, right? Or, and meeting our students every day, meeting every single student, so that the student that maybe you don't expect, who's having an issue, who's not comfortable talking about it with anyone, knows you, right? And knows their counselor and knows where to go and knows that there's support there, is just so important, because those are the people that can sometimes fall through the cracks. And I'm just really grateful to know that we're trying to reach every single student with our services. So thanks.
So,
Go ahead.
Sorry. So all things SEL excite me for obvious reasons. So I might be a little bit long, but so first off, I absolutely love and adore our school counselors. I want you to know that you all are proactive and not reactive, because it's too late to build a relationship with a student when something has happened. And so since you're already in the classroom, they already know who you are. And I love the broadened understanding of what a school counselor is from what I saw from when my now 4th grader first got to Chestnut Wold. Every year he seems to get a little bit more as to what it is that you do, but he knows who you are. He knows your name. And so oftentimes if we're waiting for a student to have a problem and then know who do I go to and how do I get to that person, it's too late. So we are absolutely proactive in that respect. I thank you for that. The other thing is that SEL lessons are providing lifelong learning. It's more than just being on time for school, because that's on being on time for work, and that's being on time for an interview, and that's being on time for et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It really speaks to our district schools of building this lifelong, amazing citizens that I know that we have in our schools. My only question is, I thought I saw an earlier slide about follow-up studies. Did I see that in one of the beginning slides?
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what types of studies might those be, or if they're
In the
specific?
very first one,
Yes.
I'll bump back a little bit.
Thank you.
So that's a requirement, one of the pieces that is a requirement from the state for us to have follow-up studies to kind of assess how our K-12 counseling plan is working. So our version of how we do the follow-up studies, because this plan really does kind of focus on career, we just chose to add in all of the other aspects of what we do. So career-wise, we're able to, maybe I should ask Amy to kind of speak to what the high school can do to pull data to see like what pathways the students are going to kind of go in after high school.
So in terms of post-high school studies or senior studies, we have the ability to use Naviance to sort of look through where students are going, how many students are going to 4-year, 2-year, technical, military. So we can see what paths students are taking. We can also see what majors they're studying or planning to study based on what data is in there. So I think that data is really useful for us as we move forward to see, if the plan that we had in place is sort of where they're ending up, where they're going from the high school.
Thank you. Excellent work. Thank you.
Yeah, so first of all, I would just like to echo what my colleague said here. I have had experience with counselors at a few schools, and your work is invaluable, and we appreciate it. And one thing that I like seeing about these programs, I'm an engineer, but I'm also an urban planner, and 3 things that I love seeing is specific, measurable, and attainable. Those are things, having vague goals that, kind of are transferable doesn't mean anything. These, I think, are fantastic. One question / suggestion that I would have is that at the end of this timeline here, 2025, 2026, if we could get, and nothing formal, it doesn't be presentation, but if we could get like a kind of a matrix saying what was done, what the goals were they accomplished, and maybe, kind of follow up for that. I think that would be great. I don't expect you to do it for the last plan because COVID threw a wrench into everything. So that I think was, kind of a mulligan, more or less. But no, I would love to see the results of this, especially as we emerge from COVID and see if these things really were met, and how we could, where we can move to keep progress going in the future. But I love these. I'm glad that they're there. I'm glad that those things are spelled out in the plans. So thank you very much.
I just, first a comment, the wellness days, I don't know if you watch our school board meetings, but every time that there has been a wellness day, usually one of our reps, like especially the high school rep, always talks about the wellness days and like just so excited. Like you can just tell how happy they are to like have the wellness days and what they did. And so I'm really glad to see that that's sort of one of the tools in your toolbox here, and that you're going to be expanding on that at the high school and middle school level, because it sounds like those are really popular and good. I mean, like, I think that's just really great. One of the questions I wanted to ask you, we've had some contracts that we've approved with Sage Wellness. How does that tie in with what you all are doing? Is that, sorry, if I don't know if that's.
No, I'm happy to take that, sure. Typically, Sage Wellness has been able to provide some training and professional development for all staff. So, and it's in areas that certainly are touched on as part of social emotional wellness, but they are not specific to our school
Okay.
counseling stuff.
Okay, okay, good, yeah, just curious. And then I wanted to echo what Dr. King said, I like the idea that, that you are very proactive, not just in social emotional, but also career readiness, and resiliency and academic goals and goal setting. And I think that that's really fantastic that those conversations start at a young age. Just getting students thinking about what it is that they're good at, what it is that excites them, you know, what are things they could do better at. I think that's really important for them to have that self-reflection starting at an earlier age so that they can build on it as they grow. And then, you know, hopefully that leads to, you know, exciting and fulfilling career paths as they get older, which is what we want for all of our kids. So thank you.
Any other questions? I was just going to jump in with also my appreciation. I have a daughter who's now in college, and I remember interactions with her, you know, counseling class through, I mean, we talked about Mud Mind and how to, you know, have a positive framework. And I think Ms. Malum, I went to a workshop that you did on positive friendships for girls in the younger grades, and, you know, those lessons benefit the students, but also the families and how to support the kids. So like your newsletters and things like that have a much broader impact. I did want to just ask two kind of questions around clarifications. Is there anything in particular in this plan that is significantly different than the prior one, like areas of new priority or focus?
Yes, the last plan really was not nearly as comprehensive. Not only were we not really asked to do as much, but also the template that had been provided at that time was very basic. So it was a little bit of a surprise, to be honest, when we saw the new template, but it's been a really great exercise for us to be able to not only, as Ms. Saxa said, answer the question, but say, we also do well beyond, you know, what we're asked to do in this district. So my sense is that the old plan was fine, but it didn't really capture what we did. We certainly have expanded our K-12 program in many, many ways, but this really allows us to showcase, you know, what we already had and then what we've added over the last several years.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And just
Yeah,
one
another
last question on, you mentioned the 22 counseling staff that we have throughout our buildings. I don't know if it's possible or if there's some standard in terms of like a ratio that the state would suggest and how we fall relative to that.
Well, the American School Counselor Association recommends a student counselor ratio of 250 students to one counselor. So we are approaching that in some grade levels, but we certainly could strive to meet that goal.
I think in our full, 62-page plan that we put together, one of the first pages does outline each counselor, their role at their school, and their ratio. So we do, I think in our elementary and high school, we're a little closer to the recommended ratio. At the middle school level, we're a little bit higher than the rest of them.
Okay, that's helpful. And you mentioned one of the outside resources that we have, but we have other placements, right, that we contract with.
We have
services
lakeside
to
staff.
provide.
Yes.
That's what I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Not Sage. I'm sorry.
I wasn't sure if that's
Lakeside.
what.
Yeah,
yes.
no, that's
So
what I meant was
we currently have 3 lakeside staff at the middle school. So our ratios are higher, but we do have support from our lakeside staff. So one of the lakeside staff members supports students with emotional support IEPs and therapeutic counseling written in. The other ones support the students. One of them supports teachers she can observe student behavior in class and give recommendations to the teachers. And then another one does short-term interventions. So we use it really like restorative practices, like for 4 to 6 weeks after a conflict, or it's more short-term than the rest. yes, we do have that extra support, and we were grateful for that extra support as well.
Thanks.
You know, it's great to hear the level of attention that goes into this. I think that in general, there seems to have been a sort of more narrow focus on, you know, reading, writing, and arithmetic in the country over the last few years, and to see all of this tonight and to hear examples really, I think, provides a palpable understanding of the positive impact that this has on our kids. Context-wise, unfortunately, we just had this state funding lawsuit decided, and unfortunately, these kinds of programs are sort of the first to go when the funding isn't there. We don't take what you do for granted. I wish we could, you know, fund everything that we do to the levels that people would like, but thank you all. This has been very enlightening, and you know, I can only imagine. I mean, I'm almost 70, and I couldn't give you 6 pieces of career evidence. This was, thank you very much for this presentation.
Hearing no other discussion, then thank you so much for the presentation, and we'll move on to the next item.
Great. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate it. Okay, it's a big night because we are also here, and you see so many members of our audience this evening are here to share an overview of our MTSS program at the elementary level. MTSS stands for a multi-tiered system of support. And so it's a relatively new iteration of intervention and support for students that's happening at the elementary level. It evolved from something that used to be called I&E. If anyone has been here for a little while, you may recall I&E. We actually took a look at what we were able to provide in the half an hour of I&E, and we took a look at what we believed were going to be the increased needs, both in variety and depth, returning from the pandemic. And as an elementary team, decided to focus on really creating a more robust and systematic approach to intervention for all students, something that could help students grow, whether they needed to grow because they're usually high performers and they need to be higher performers, or whether they needed to grow because there was a target skill that they needed just to get to the grade level performance. And so this is year 2, and we are here, I say we because it's a big group, are here to share an overview of how that's working and how it came to be, and some of our local benchmark assessment data. Not that it is only attributable to MTSS, but it is one of the ways we measure the success of MTSS. So I don't have the clicker. Thank you, sorry. I just want to start, thanks, and we'll probably end up going back and forth with this, but we'll see how I can do here. Okay, there we go. So just a brief overview. What is MTSS? It's a 45-minute daily period in the elementary school day. Students basically sort of get up and move to an area that's going to give them what they need. We alternate back and forth between math and ELA. Some schools alternate, 2 days of one, 2 days of the other. Some schools have looked at their data and said we need 6 weeks of ELA and then we'll do more math. It's really data-based, and we are trying to make sure the intervention happens, but we recognize in different schools it may look a little differently. When we first introduced the concept of expanding and sort of shifting to a multi-tiered system of support, we shared with staff, it was the summer of 21. It was actually the spring and summer that a task force got together, and then we sort of updated folks. These are the goals that we outlined for people. They're listed here. One was a consistent screening that occurred in both math and reading that could help measure progress so that we could target the instruction. And that included finding a measure that could more accurately show us the growth of students versus just the academic achievement of students, because our students do achieve pretty well academically. So we needed to make sure they were also growing. We believe that goal has been completed. and we are here. We have that map, not that we would ever sort of rest on our laurels, but we believe that one is in place. Provide consistent intervention and support practices to help all students learn and grow. Complete. We always want more resources, and we're able to sort of refine a little bit more. Okay, we had this, but that one's not working as we expected. So can we have a little bit more comprehension, or we actually need a little more hands-on for this one? You know, like we're able to refine now. Number 3, provide educators with intervention tools and the time to use them. Again, time's in there, tools are there, still want more or maybe some refined tools. Number 4, ensure that systematic intervention is a part of our CST process. That's our child study team. So when a student is struggling academically, sometimes social emotionally, there's a team of folks at every elementary school that takes a look and says, you know, what's been happening historically? What do the assessments say? What else can we learn about this child? And one of the goals of MTSS is to provide some intervention for a child so that perhaps they don't ever qualify to be tested for special education services. Perhaps we can catch it and you know, help them achieve the progress they need to. And make sure that that's happening across the board, and not just because a certain school happens to have an extra IA that's available during this particular period of the day, right? Sort of make it a part of how we work. Intervene, this is number 5, intervene and improve student achievement to reduce the identification for special education. So that's what I just described, and Mrs. Adalizzi very, you know, joyfully shared with me some data on that. We are down, our specific learning disability identification is down 10% from the prior year, and that's exactly the kinds of skills that we are targeting in MTSS. So we are reducing the number of students, or the percentages of students who are identified as needing additional testing and support. I already mentioned that our plan was that we would have a greater variety and depth of needs coming back from the pandemic. That is ongoing. We are addressing those needs. Last year, we really learned that a lot of those needs, we couldn't even get to the academic because the behavioral, and I'm not just talking about like quote unquote bad behavior, like academic behaviors were not there. They were 2 years ago and they had to catch up. And so, you know, we had teachers really responding to that in addition to also trying to get kids back to where they wanted them to be academically. We are still working in both of those areas, so it remains a priority. And, you know, I kept this one on here because I sort of chuckled to myself. Provide additional support in the 21-22 school year so they'll be back on track. Yeah. So they are getting on the track, right? And we know that worked really well. Some students, no problem. And other students, it's going to take a little longer than that. And that's okay. And that's, again, why we're looking at systematically including this as opposed to luck of the draw. You happen to have a resource available to you. I mentioned before that there was a task force, so thank you to the folks you see in the little box over here. That's a team of reading specialists, gifted ed support teachers, general ed support teachers, pupil services folks, psychologists, all kinds of people who got together to look as a task force and say, what should MTSS look like for us? How should we do it? What resources are we going to need? How are we going to do the testing? What's our schedule going to be, et cetera. So that group came together and made the recommendations and then worked with our curriculum folks to devise what the actual content of what they would be doing during that 45 minutes would be. Some of those resources here include time, of course, we need that time. We need the actual materials, so we had to purchase some additional materials and some we already had. We needed people. So we have a lot of those folks already in place. What we were able to do with some ESSER funding is find folks who could fill in for our interventionists while they then focused on intervening. So we're lucky enough to have a seasoned professional from each school who was left their classroom role for the last 2 years and is acting as the interventionist. And so we are using some funding to replace them as teachers in their classrooms for that period of time. We needed the actual programs. We have shared in the past, we have created resources that, you know, if this is the issue the child's having, click here, and here are the sets of resources you may find helpful to use with that child. And that includes some recommendations that come from the MAP testing that our math coaches are going to talk a little bit about this evening as well. We evaluate in an ongoing way the success of MTSS, and we use some of these things. Particularly our MAP growth scores. You'll also see a little bit about Ames Web, which is a reading assessment this evening, our curriculum-based assessments, and then we gather staff and student feedback to sort of learn a little bit more about the experiential part and not only the academic part. So tonight is about how it's going. I talked a little bit about sort of our progress toward those initial goals. We'll share some assessment data. Manoa has created a really great video about what it's looked like at Manoa and the evolution of MTSS over a series of years. So we'll see that. We'll have our coaches and our interventionist perspectives. And then interspersed throughout, we have a few teacher reflections and some fun student quotes. So you'll see them. We tried to break up the data with some student quotes. So hopefully that sort of perks everybody back up. So we're going to start with Mrs. Bush, whose name may seem familiar. She actually started as a reading intern through our Kutztown program and is now a contracted first grade teacher and doing a wonderful job for our students. So here's what she had to say about MTSS, I hope. Let's see. Oh, no, that's not how I do it. Oh, okay, there we go. That's the Manoa one. There we go.
To meet kids where they are and then move them forward using their data and supportive resources. Smaller groupings make it easier to plan and instruct students. Data review meetings are imperative, with all teachers on the team, reading specialists, interventionists, and administrators present to look at data and think about students.
So you heard Mrs. Bush talk a little bit about the smaller groups that are possible. Once again, that's because we have the interventionists in their position, they automatically take a group of students out, and then the rest of the students are spread out among the teachers, and if there's a reading specialist available, and sort of other support folks. We're going to get into a little bit of the MAP data right now to get you a sense of like how we're using that data to create our groups and address the specific student needs. What we're looking at tonight are reports that are by building and by grade level a little bit. Just so you know, there are a ton. There are, over 10 different reports in MAP, and they can be looked at as granular as the student level, as the class level, as the grade level, as the school level. So what we're gonna see tonight is more like the 75,000 foot view, but our principals are looking more carefully at their own specific, they have 20 sets of classroom data to look at, 30 sets. Teachers have all of their students, not only in their homeroom, but their MTSS students, et cetera. Coaches are looking across grade. So there are lots of different ways to do this. What we're going to just show you this evening are what are called quintile reports, and Dr. Nesbitt and Mrs. Connolly will correct me if I say any of this piece wrong. But quintile reports are sort of illustrated here. What they do is all the students get a percentile for their score. They get a score from taking an assessment. It's an online assessment. It's in reading and it's in math, two different ones, but they're the same company. They get what's called a RIT score, which helps to make sure that we can compare scores across the grade. So you want to see the RIT score going up, right? And then what they do is tens of thousands of students across the country take this assessment. They put all of them, in a data set, and they say these are the bottom, these are the 0 to 21 scoring percentile kids, these are the 21 to 40, et cetera. So you can see along there how they've color coded it. So if we were a perfectly average school system, every single graph that you're about to see would look just like this. 20% would look like that. It would be divided evenly, right? That's a perfectly average. What you're going to see is that, there's no such thing as perfectly average, right? And what you want to see is, more kids in the yellow, green, blue, and fewer kids in the orange and red, right? So just to give you a sense of what you see here. And now Mrs. Connolly is going to send us through, if I give her the clicker, thank you.
We got a few graphs.
A few graphs, sort of what that looks like in each building.
All right.
For reading.
So we're going to look at graphs of reading first, and we're going to go by building. I'm not going to talk about each individual graph, but you can see here all grades 1 through 5. This is Chatham Elementary. And again, if you're thinking about those quintiles, you can start to see where we have trends and where we don't have trends. But you can see mostly there's more green and blue. Again, here, mostly more green and blue. You might see the trend up in first grade, that they're a little bit more even across the quintiles. And then here's Linwood. And then Manoa. So the first thing we want to see is, one of the things we've noticed is that grade 1 is sort of a focus, right? That was where it was more evenly distributed. It's relative because in most schools, we still have 50% in those top 2 quintiles. In grade 1, they're teaching foundations with fidelity, which is what we want, and that's teaching them how to decode, that's their phonics. And it's also teaching them their reading comprehension. They need both of those things for MAP because that's what it's measuring, honestly, is reading comprehension, which means you have to be able to read and then also comprehend. We're getting there. In overall, I would say that the other grades are all doing really pretty well. We had more green, we had more blue. We're not really noticing trends of other grades. We will continue to help support the teachers. And we have to remember, this is our first year of giving MAP in ELA. So we gave it in math last year, but this is our first year for ELA. And for our ELA focus teachers in 4th and 5th grade, this is their first time administering it at all, whereas the K through 3 teachers gave the MAP math last year. This is the first time for the focus teachers in ELA. We will look at the testing conditions because we heard that some of those were tricky in some of the schools, the connectivity and that sort of thing, supporting the teachers as they teach the curriculum to make sure that we are supporting them and giving them everything they need. And then also making sure that students understand that we're trying to find their just right level. Because MAP will give them, a question that they can answer and they feel successful. And then they see a question that they can't answer. We have to help them to feel comfortable to say, do your best and move on. The only way we can find out what is your just right level is to give you some things that you don't know how to answer yet. So we want to, and we may do a better job of that in some classrooms, being able to say to kids, don't worry about that. That is part of the test. But that's also us learning, right? It's a learning curve for us to understand that test better. So I think that it's a place where students will be more comfortable with that uncomfortable, the discomfort of I didn't know the answer, and so that they don't shut down, that they keep trying because they're going to see others that they do know and they will be able to answer. And that will help us to find out where they're ready to learn. The second assessment that we use as a screening tool in English Language Arts is AimsWeb, and that you're familiar with. We've been doing AimsWeb for a long time. It's AimsWeb Plus at this point. We're using it only as a screening tool for fluency now in grades 2 through 5. So we only use that one subtest, which means they don't produce the nice trees that you're going to see in K1. Mm-hmm. It is administered 1-to-1, which is time consuming, but it does allow the teachers to listen to students read, which they really like. And we're going to see a comparison of data from fall to winter. It is used by data teams to triangulate the data and to help determine students' needs. And that's why we're continuing to use AimsWeb, because it helps us to set some progress monitoring goals and to help measure progress. So let's take a look. You're going to see the kindergarten, and then you'll see first grade. So we'll do kindergarten across. And this is, one grade level at one school. And I have my pointer tonight. Let's see if it reaches that far. Oh, it doesn't. Okay, on the left is kindergarten through last year. Now, this is the same, it's comparing kindergarten to this year. It's not a cohort because, of course, there wasn't anybody in school last year before our kindergarten because we don't have a pre-K. So this is last year's kindergarten compared to this year's kindergarten. And as you go across, you're going to notice that we may not have begun the same place in the fall, but in the winter, we're similar to where we were last year. In this case, we're doing better than we were in the winter last year, about the same as the winter last year. We had fewer people in the fall, though, who were in the yellow, so that was helpful. We're making some progress, and then you can see the numbers change, and they don't look terribly different from last year. And again, some similarities in kindergarten. In first grade, again, now this is first grade last year to first grade this year. It's not the same cohort. And these students are continuing to improve as well. They look better than they did in the winter last year in some cases. And there's another case of that. And then, not quite as well. So our takeaways for that are that AimsWeb continues to be a good screening tool that we like to use. We're on or about where we were last year with kindergarten at the same place. There is lots of growth in kindergarten from winter to spring. At this point, students have all been introduced to their letters and their sounds, and they're beginning to solidify this knowledge so they can put them together to read words, and especially short vowel words and that sort of thing, applying their knowledge in writing. In first grade, the data is a little bit less consistent overall, we noticed. 2 schools are doing better than last year, 3 schools are about the same or slightly different than last year. But as with MAP, this data was taken earlier than it was usually taken. Usually we are taking it a little bit later and after the winter break. We're using Foundations with Fidelity, as I said, and we've brought in trainers to help train teachers to make sure that any questions they had about teaching Foundations have been answered. They've got to see some more modeling, and we've been able to bring more of that information across to all schools. And we anticipate that the students will continue to progress as they have in the past years. Second grade and above, although we use fluency as a measure, as I said, the teachers do find it helpful as an additional data point when looking at a full students composite to figure out who needs to be in MTSS groups and who needs additional support. So now I'm going to turn it over. Is it back to you?
Yeah, I'll do the fun stuff, and then I'll give you guys.
You do the fun stuff, do you? I'll let Dr. Nesbitt handle the clicker.
I won't read all these, just before we move on to the math data. We're sprinkling in, here's some comments from our students about what they think about MTSS. The first slide are sort of the positives, and then we also ask them, okay, well, what would you change or what's not working so well? So some of these positives include things like the fact that concepts in some groups are pre-taught, so that students who may not have grasped the math concept right away in class have already had some exposure to it, and they can get to math class and say, oh yeah, I know we were talking about that. I may not exactly get it, but now I have another chance at it. So there's some pre-teaching that helps. In other classes, it's reinforcement. Kids are enjoying that. And in others, enrichment is the focus. So I'm going to give you a moment to look through these. I don't have to read them all, but just take a moment. It's helped me with reading and learning about other people. We read a book about people with disabilities. I get to see other people. One student is happy about that. Some students don't like that. Some students do like that, right? Lets me be creative, helps me with tests, pushes me to be the best I can. I love it. I love Addie, whoever she is. I'm very happy. So it's a nice opportunity for kids. These were the good ones. If we want to click to the next one, these are some things that, I wish I had more time. I love this. I wish I had more time during MTSS for Zern so we don't have to do it for homework. At first I was excited, and then I got to the second part of that sentence. Want to do more reading, which would be really great. This person loves history. Then there was, we've gone back and forth with how do we switch for MTSS? Do we stay with the certain class? Do we switch one way? Do we switch another way? So here's a student, the third bullet down, that liked it better when we switched for ELA and math and not just staying in my class, because I get to be with different friends and teachers. They do like choice boards, which is something we're encouraging. I love having a different teacher like the big kids. And I like when my MTSS group is smaller, so I'm not afraid to ask questions. So that is important not only to the teachers, you'll hear that from interventionists, teachers, coaches, everyone, but also from students. All right, Jeff.
So we have the same charts for math that we had for reading. And again, we see similar trends. And really the reason that we brought MAP in was to get much more granular. These are nice big reports, and it's nice to see general overviews. But when we bring the math coaches up here, really the power of MAP is when we can go to a student and identify very clearly what the student needs to learn. So these can give us big pictures, and we can start talking about, okay, where in particular, and most of the time we start with this, and then we do drill down into like a grade level report and really look at, a specific grade in a specific building and maybe classrooms within that building to start to think about, okay, what additional supports, what are they doing in this classroom versus this classroom, and how do we support them? But again, the goal is yellow, green, and blue, and when you see these charts, that's generally what we're doing. It's been really great to have interventionists because those students that are in the red, they really are struggling students. They probably are at least a grade level behind in math, and so they need a very focused attention to bring them back up to where we'd like to get them to be, and having those interventionists really helps provide that type of support that really a classroom teacher can't. It's just impossible in math to support someone who doesn't know their multiplication facts when you're doing fractions in 4th grade and you need common denominators. They just can't come up with the common denominators if they don't have their basic facts. So by having an additional time with the interventionist where they can work on those concepts, it's been really beneficial. Here again, universally, as you look through this, our 3rd grade has done particularly well. You'll see in general, 3rd grade at a lower red. This is a little bit different, but this one you can see the 5th grade's doing really well. And in this one, again, you can see 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, the small red bars and bigger green and blue bars. So those are the things that jump out real quickly to me. And then, like I said, this is just a general summary, and the important thing is then to dig deeper and figure out how do we really support kids with this information. So overall, the 3rd grade looks like it's doing pretty well. 1st grade was a little bit up and down, and that is, as Ms. Saxa said earlier, some schools have elected to do 6 weeks of ELA, particularly at those early levels, because obviously learning to read is sort of the kindergarten 1st grade focus. So if they're not having additional math time, then we're not going to see as good math scores. Whereas some buildings might say, okay, our math and reading are similar, and so we're alternating days. So you see a little bit differences there. 4th and 5th grade are also doing well. Again, it's dependent upon the building, and it's dependent upon strengths and weaknesses for all of them. Some 5th grades are doing better than 4th grade, some 4th grade better than 5th grade, but overall, generally positive results.
Great, thank you,
This one too.
Dr. Nesbitt. If you don't mind, Dr. Mosser and Mr. Quinn are here from Manoa, and they are, yes, I agree, 100%, yes. And if you don't mind, would you mind just coming to the podium and giving us a quick intro to what we're about to see here? One building's journey.
Good evening and thank you. We are very excited to be here and show you what we are doing at Manoa. But we work as a team. As an elementary team, we have shared some insight on how our schools best use MTSS. And a few things I just want you to think about as you are watching the video, because the women say it better than I can. But a few things. Academic behaviors. How we use those academic behaviors to really know our students so that we can serve them and give them what they need. Second, how we use the data to group and to drive instruction. We decided to change how we use the data from the beginning of the year to the middle of the year. And there's good reasons why, because in the beginning of the year, we didn't know our students as well. But now we know them, and as we are learning how to use the map data, we're able to go deeper and understand why students are performing the way they're performing. And finally, the human capital of how we use MTSS, how we can create those small groups because of the supports that we have, and where those supports lie, and how we can target certain grade levels so that we could give kids what they need so that they can feel comfortable taking those risks with learning. And that is a group effort. So this is not just, even though it's one school's journey, it's our team as an elementary team, how we're constantly having those conversations and working with Jeff and Sandy, and how we're working with each other, and then how we translate that into our schools so that we can give our students what they need. So enjoy the show.
Good evening. My name is Michelle Welsh, and I am a reading specialist at Manoa Elementary. We put this little video together to give you a snapshot of what our MTSS process looks like in our school. Here at Manoa, we begin the MTSS process with assessment. The more precise and accurate our assessments are, the more accurately we can place students in groups that support their need. These groups are fluid, based on data, so they match students as they grow and their needs change. Multiple data points are used to group students, and we're going to focus on 2 of them here today. One of the assessments we used is MAP Reading Growth. We use this for both ELA and math. These assessments assess a range of reading and math skills and are very comprehensive. They are adaptive and take the students through a range of levels based on their progress. The results help to form instruction, and it can be administered to the whole class at the same time. The other assessment that we're focusing on today is Ames Web Plus assessment. In this assessment, different probes are administered to different grades. These probes are skill specific and can identify strengths and needs in specific subskills. It is administered individually and allows a teacher to hear and see how a student is reading. Here at Manoa, we have a SWAT team approach, and each class takes about 15 to 20 minutes to assess. It is used to identify needs for specific skill instruction in MTSS groups. This is especially useful in the primary grades. This specificity allows us to help students focus on their needs in specific skills. By combining these assessments and more, we can be sure students are receiving the exact instruction that fits their needs and strengths during MTSS.
Good evening, I'm Caitlin Wishart, the other reading specialist at Manoa, and I'm going to talk further about the groupings of MTSS at Manoa. First, the structure of the groups. We made an intentional decision at Manoa to have A weeks and B weeks for MTSS. A weeks have a focus on ELA instruction, and B weeks have a focus on math instruction. Both A and B weeks have 1 day dedicated to social emotional learning. We made this decision for a couple of reasons. First, there's consistency in skill instruction. When a student is working with the same teacher on the same skill, it allows teachers to really build upon those skills if they see the student almost every day of the week. Secondly, we think it's more responsive to students' social emotional needs to be able to build a rapport with the same teacher and be in the same place almost every day in the week. We think benefits our students. We also made a team decision to have 6 consecutive weeks of ELA instruction in the fall for our first grade students. This decision was also twofold. First, we believe it's developmentally appropriate as these students are shifting from a half day of instruction in kindergarten to a full day. In the fall, it was just too much shifting around to have A weeks and B weeks for these young students. We also believe first graders, there's a sweet spot for reading growth. This is a time when students are starting to continue to develop their foundational skills and start to apply those skills to reading. And to be able to have 6 consecutive weeks of ELA instruction really benefits these students the most in the fall. We also then analyze students' skill gaps and strengths. As Michelle said, we look as specific as subtests, especially for grade 1 students. Seeing where students struggle the most or where students excel the most, we're able to place them in an appropriate MTSS group based on that data. We also take a look at our staffing availability to be able to provide the smallest groups possible for students to meet students' needs. Here are some observations and noticings after 1 year of MTSS instruction. In grade 1, we noticed in the 2021-22 school year, our students made a lot of growth. We attribute this partially to the 6 weeks consecutive instruction in ELA only. And we also believe the small group sizes, having a lot of highly trained staff available, reading specialists, interventionists, special educators, to be able to work with these students in very small groups. We believe that we're really meeting the students' needs. We also noticed that in grades 3 through 5, there was some inconsistency with the MTSS screening data, the assessment data, and the leveling. Some children, for example, in a 4th grade class are outperforming peers and perhaps the level of their class, their grade level class, does not necessarily match what they need according to their data and assessment. So looking closely at their assessment and being sure that during the MTSS block, students are appropriately placed. Lastly, we saw a need for additional resources. We were very low on high engagement, high quality literature, and it caused us to, as a team, apply for a grant through the Education Foundation, which we were recently awarded, to be able to provide more high quality, high engagement reading materials for teachers to utilize during the MTSS block.
Hi, my name is Barry Butler. I'm the interventionist at Manoa Elementary School. I'm going to talk to you about Manoa's journey on best supporting our students specifically during Math MTSS. In the fall, Dr. Mosser, Mr. Quinn, our school psychologist, our math coaches, and I collaboratively looked at our math data and grouped students across all grade levels according to their abilities in numbers and operations. We found this was an area of great need for all students across all grade levels. In the winter, we shifted our focus to student growth to ensure that we're meeting the needs of all learners. In first and second grade, our teachers are all providing math instruction during Math MTSS weeks to students grouped according to their math testing and classroom observations. In third through fifth grade, our students are already leveled in math classes. So instead of regrouping students, math teachers are providing instruction to their own students. We shifted our thinking for two reasons. First, our teachers in the upper grades who are focused teaching know their own content best. Second, who better knows their students at this point in the school year than the students' own teachers? Small groups are still being pulled across all grade levels to support our neediest students during MTSS.
Hello, I'm Sandy Turek, the Manoa Gifted Support Teacher. This year, we have put several steps in place to ensure that we are identifying those students who are in need of gifted support services. First, Dr. Mosser had me added to the new student registration emails from the registrar. I can then review the records from the previous school to look for screening results, standardized testing information, and report cards. I am also attending data meetings to form MTSS groups. In those meetings, I am able to discuss those high-scoring students with their teachers. As a result of these meetings, we have issued 6 PTEs for gifted evaluations and have 5 additional students currently in the GCST process. With the increase in screening, I trained our interventionist to administer this lesson screening assessment. This enables us to assess more students. I have also studied the book, Seeing and Serving Underserved Gifted Students. This book contains practical teacher toolkit strategies. These strategies are being shared at monthly faculty meetings. This book also correlates with our equity work. Dr. Mosser highlights characteristics and associated behaviors of gifted learners in her weekly staff newsletter. I have also worked with teachers of the highest level MTSS groupings to provide enrichment and extension materials.
So I wanted to thank the team over at Manoa for putting that presentation together, just to give you some specific examples. And Dr.
Yes.
Mosser.
And so just to conclude, what we have received from MTSS from starting this, we have taken first and second grade, our interventions in decoding, those sections have reduced. So we now don't have to do a double dose of foundations for second and for first grade because students have mastered that. So that's why we're moving on to more of the comprehension skills. So that's kudos to the first and second grade teams. In addition, I have to say that Mrs. Turg's data was inaccurate because within the past 2 weeks of doing that video, we have not 6 students who are under permissions to evaluate. We have 9 for gifted and 2 have already qualified. So we are really having rich conversations about how we're really looking at the data and how we're finding those students. And finally, with our intervention supports, that is the only support we have that's a non-IEP intervention for math for grades 1st through 5th grade, and it's our only intervention for MTSS for grades 3, 4, and 5. So that intervention specialist is crucial, especially not only she's serving kids, but she is working to plan with teachers as well. And as you see, also giving the Slauson, because we have many to give, and we're really excited about it. So that's how MTSS is really impacting the change of really giving kids what they need. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mosser. And to Mr. Quinn for being here. They have a retirement party. Their retirement from Manoa is happening as we speak, this very moment. So I thank you both for being here. I know your hearts are also there, and thank you to your team for putting that together. Next, I wanted to welcome up Jen Menaker and Kim Bohr to share with us. They are two of the interventionists that Dr. Mosser was just speaking of. We have 5, one in each building. Jen is over at Linwood and Kim is at Coopertown, and they're going to share a little bit of their perspective on life as an interventionist.
Hi, I'm Kim Bohr, so I'm the interventionist over at Coopertown Elementary, and I'm going to focus a little bit about all the benefits of teaching in a small group, which I've taught 2nd grade for about 18, 19 years, and this is definitely a shift for me, but it's been awesome. MTSS has certainly evolved over the 2 years, as it will continue to change and improve. However, at the core, the concept will always stay the same. During MTSS, not only can the interventionist take a small group during the designated time, but it gives all teachers a chance to differentiate all levels of needs: enrichment, reinforcement, and reteaching. Students who may be struggling a bit in the classroom in both language arts and/or math are given an opportunity to work in a much smaller group than their classroom to reinforce materials being taught in the whole group. In addition, some students are able to learn at a faster pace and are ready to apply those concepts in a more complex manner. They are also able to be part of a smaller group to learn amongst peers with similar needs during MTSS. While this idea of small group reinforcement has existed with the reading specialist, we're now able to support an even wider group of students due to the additional personnel. Students who may not have been previously eligible for extra help can now be better supported. Prior to MTSS, small group pull-out help in math did not exist. However, so many students need additional exposure and time to build a strong number foundation. In the past, sometimes the gap had widened so greatly that students felt like they simply couldn't catch up. In addition to the academic benefits of the small group, there's a noticeable change in demeanor and attitude towards learning when the students are in MTSS. Being a part of a smaller group is a lot less intimidating for some students. It has become a safe haven for students to ask questions and gain confidence to take those skills back to their classroom. Specifically, my 4th grade group, consisting of about 6 to 8 students, is always eager to work together. They laugh, have casual conversations about topics, all while learning and practicing difficult concepts such as fractions. At times, they will even come on days that they're not supposed to be in my classroom. And they choose to complete their independent work at that time, which is great. The students helped create their own small learning community where they're willing to take risks and feel more confident in their studies. There are many small group success stories as seen by our data. Even standing at bus duty today, I took note of the many faces of students who I used to work with, but no longer work with them because they've tested out of my group. A bittersweet feeling for sure. Jen's now going to talk a little bit about how we collect our data to create groups to target student needs.
And I think a lot of what I have to say has sort of already been discussed quite a bit, so I certainly won't dive and reiterate some of those things. But one of the points that I'd like to really point out is having our scheduled data meetings that we have throughout our calendar. From Linwood, I know that our building has them steady on the calendar every 6 weeks, which is wonderful as a team effort for us to come together and really dive deep into the data that we have. But I think something else that's really important to kind of notice is while we are very excited about the data we're seeing, it's also a great opportunity for us to speak about the children that we work with every day. We know that data is very important and it's a wonderful thing to have to make decisions, but we also know there's a lot of variables that go into that. And so one of the things that I'm very appreciative of in those meetings is having the perspective from a lot of staff members who are not only familiar with the curriculum, but you can tell they're really familiar with the students and the age group in front of them. And something that I've been able to kind of contribute, which is exciting for me, is along with the reading specialists, I have the privilege of working with students in 1st through 5th grade. So not only do I see where they're starting, I know where they need to go as well. And that's something that we can kind of contribute in those meetings where we're really talking deeply about what we want to provide to our students, the resources that we have, and how we can get them to where we want them to be, especially before they leave 5th grade. I think a couple other things that I just wanted to make a note on is the incredible creativity I think we've seen with pulling resources between last year and this year. I know that that has been something really exciting for a lot of the staff members to kind of dive into their toolbox. Because of this time period, we have a 45 minutes of extra time. And when we, especially in those data meetings, we'll hear teachers say, oh, I have a great activity that we've done before. I'm going to dig that out and pull that out and work with the students. And the fact that they're given this gift of small group instruction and 45 minutes of time, I think that overall it has really been just a blessing for all of us to kind of have that time to work together and know what works and have the resources available. Did I cover everything? Okay.
Great. Thank you both. Up next, we are going to hear from another duo of teachers. Our two math coaches, Lauren Schaefer and Susie Kinsley, are going to talk to us a little bit about how they use the data that we've been discussing to support teaching and instructional decisions that are being made in the classrooms. Oh,
there we go.
Do I have
Perfect.
it? Who's got the clicker?
Okay,
Jeff's got the
has it.
clicker.
Magic.
Okay.
So Lauren and I as coaches, we're not working with the students once we have the data on the students, but we are then working with the teachers. Our interventionists take some of those, the most struggling students, and work with them. And then we sit with the teachers and we sit down, okay, now what do we do with everybody else? So there are, as it has been said before, many, many reports that we can choose from to look at the data. No one is necessarily better than the other, but this particular one is a really great place to start. There's a report called the Learning Continuum on MAP that's available once the kids' test results are in. And the Learning Continuum is basically a content explorer. And you're seeing a part of the report. It's a much bigger report. You're seeing 2 specific 10-point RIT bands. There might be 8 of those for a particular teacher for their class. And in addition to that, this particular report off to the side with each of these RIT bands, you're going to see the names of students in their classroom who fall within those 10 points. So with this data, we're going to look, with this report, we're going to be looking and seeing the learning statements that are there for each RIT band that we have students. So each one of those up there, I can't see them, hopefully that you can. Contacts, they don't work that well. You would look at those learning statements, and each learning statement describes skills and concepts that students were assessed at that particular level. And they give us some insight into what they were assessed on and therefore what they are ready to learn. So we're going to sit down, we're going to look at this report, we're going to look at the students who fall in those bands, and one of the first decisions we're going to make is, are there any of those learning statements that we don't really need to worry about right now? So perhaps some of those learning statements apply to modules we haven't gotten to yet. So we know we're going to get to them eventually, and we're not going to worry about those just yet. So we're going to hone down what we're going to focus on. So then we're going to look deeper, we're going to look at those learning statements, and we're going to say, okay, of the ones that are left, let's prioritize what we need to work on. So we're going to see, are there things in there, depending on the difficulty level in those different RIT bands, that students maybe we're working on those things right now in class, so they just need a little bit of review. And then other things we might look at and say, we've taught that extensively, and that's still showing up as something that needs to be worked on. So we're going to make sure that we go back, we provide some foundational guidance, we provide some foundational lessons, or a lot more intervention for those particular skills. And that's where we're going to start there. Lauren's going to show you another report we use to dig even deeper.
So tied really directly to the learning continuum is another report that it kind of is actually my go-to report when I'm working with the teachers, because to me it's a very visual way to see your small groups. So with every set of testing in fall, winter, and spring, there's going to be a norm for a grade level. This particular report that's up here is actually a sample report that comes from NWEA, and I'm just going to guess that it was a third grade report. It did show that it was from the fall. So the norm for the fall in third grade is a 188. That 188 is going to fall, hopefully you have a larger one in front of you. You can see which RIP band that 188 falls in. The standard deviation for the fall was also about 13.5. So when you're looking at this class breakdown, the teachers can actually identify that direct norm, that 188, and then they can look and say, okay, here are all my students who are falling right at that norm, but then our broader norm, our one standard deviation above and below, really is our students who, they're on track. We're probably going to group these students together, and like Susie said, we're going to dig into the learning continuum, and these are the students who we're going to really provide that extra practice to. We're going to stay within the concepts that we're likely teaching right then. We're going to dig into the problem sets together. We're going to do some problem solving together, but we're finding that for them, based on their learning continuum, that it's really best to support them with what we're currently doing in the classroom. But then you can also see your students who are above the norm and your students who are below. We're going to take the students who are showing that, you know what, they don't need more of the same. They don't need that extra practice in what we're currently teaching. We need to actually dig deeper. Their learning continuum is showing us, okay, it's time to engage them in some higher level critical thinking tasks and activities. So let's group some of these students together. Let's pull the resources. Sandy had mentioned in the Manoa video, the problem solving activities. Let's grab some of these. We have amazing resources that we've put together over the years to really engage them and to, again, higher level critical thinking, start to really grow them from where they are. Then you have the opposite end of the spectrum. If you go to our more struggling students, or the ones who are just even slightly below the norm, more than likely, the handful of students are going to be pulled with the interventionist. The interventionist can then use that learning continuum as well. And actually, one of our standards within third, fourth, and fifth standard resources are the foundational lessons. We know that these students are currently struggling with the concepts that we are teaching in class. So what we're going to do is use this learning continuum to say, okay, well, where is their zone of proximal development? Where can we find that material, that concept at their level, and help them to make connections, help them to stretch their thinking to bring them back up to, or bring them to where we really want them to be. So again, the majority of those students are going to go with the interventionist, but we are going to have some really good, solid small group instruction within the regular classroom as well. And then taking it one step further, and if you don't mind clicking for me, we have some students that the teachers will start to bring to our attention really as a concern. They start to question, okay, you know what, maybe we need a little bit more here even. Maybe this is somebody who, based on all sorts of factors, we're going to keep our eye on, and maybe we actually want a little bit more of an intensive intervention plan. And so we can actually, and within this class breakdown report, if you click on any student, it brings up their individual learning continuum. So we can identify very specific standards. So let's say again that this was a third grade class, and we look at our one little friend who's furthest on the left for numbers and operations. We can look at their learning continuum and say, oh, you know what? That's actually showing us they're ready to learn. These are first grade standards. So maybe we need to target some specific standards, put an intervention plan in place that brings in the interventionist, ties in some additional small group instruction within the classroom, and again, starts to work in the support that individual student needs. So weekly, monthly, before every module, Susie and I will sit down with the teachers. We'll break out the class breakdown report and we'll say, all right, who's going to go into each group? what are the resources going to look like that really support each learner as best we can.
Great, thank you both. And I will just say, as a testament to the value of working with the coaches, we recently in January had a professional development session where elementary teachers could select where they went after we went over some of these map reports and said, okay, where do you want to go? Susie and Lauren's rooms were like packed. There were people standing up in the corner. Like, they were all really interested in learning more about how to use the resources. And this is the work that they do. You know, a lot of this would be very hard for a teacher to dig in at that level for this many students every day. This is where they can make it a part of the practice and help them do that work more efficiently. So thank you for describing how that impacts not only MTSS, but the general work in the classroom as well. Who wants to hear what more students have to say? This is the last slide of this, and I believe that maybe Jen Maneker got this list together for us from her students. What do we like best about MTSS? Sharing stories. They do have buddies that they work with, getting to practice and read fun stories. Again, some really like moving to a new space and seeing friends who are not in their class. Seeing their MTSS teacher, isn't that nice? It's another adult to connect with. And practicing fluency and the ever popular use of the whiteboard, right? That is always a popular, take out a marker and I'm happy. So more from students, those are the positives as well. So thank you for gathering those. The last formal slide we have here before our thank you is to just acknowledge that there are needs associated with this. You heard the Manoa folks talk about writing a grant to get more resources. Every year Jeff and Sandy develop a budget. It evolves throughout the year. What we thought was going to be enough is sometimes enough. And sometimes it's like, all right, well, we got to order something different for next year, or we've got to get more of this instead. So that's a constant conversation. We don't want teachers to have to go out to the Ed Foundation. We're always grateful for that to be a resource, but it's certainly not our only resource. And so we will continue to have these needs as the program continues to develop. You've heard over and over again about the interventionists. Again, that is funding through the ESSER grant, the ARP ESSER, you may have heard of it, ESSER 3, it's got a lot of names. But those funds are allowed to be expended through September of 24. So essentially we have one more school year. And we had originally funded the interventionists for 1 year. We were able to shift some funds around, partially because we couldn't get personnel to fill other positions. So we had hoped to hire, a licensed behavioral specialist, and there were none available. And so we were able to shift some funds over. We are continuing to make some shifts. We made them available this year. We will use whatever remaining funds are available to, contribute to funding the interventionists for next year to whatever degree that's possible. And interventionists do remain our priority. They would not be able to be funded by ESSER after next school year. Again, additional resources, we need to make sure we're keeping up on those assessments. The MAP assessment is not free, AIMSWeb is not free, it's part of what we would need to do anyway, but it does support MTSS. We are layering in behavior and social emotional wellness supports. So we're test driving some resources now. They're called Fly 5 cards that are aligned with Responsive Classroom. You may have heard of Second Step. It's also like a classroom kit that helps kids with sort of executive functioning and those kinds of academic behaviors, as well as additional interventions for when MTSS isn't working. What can we do? Is there another layer, a tier 3 layer? And of course, we're always looking for continuous improvement. I just want to say a big thank you. I really cannot overstate the effort and energy that it took, particularly in year 1, to get this up and running. The teachers, oh my goodness, the planning that they had to come up with, and the ideas, and the getting to know the data differently, and the guidance that our interventionists, who, by the way, were sort of crafting the position as they went, right? We all had an idea of how it would look, but then you have to see what does it really turn out to be. And the principals answering 1,000 questions, trying to structure it. None of these things, you never implement a program and it just stays how you implemented it. And the first year is always the hardest, and then now we're seeing, okay, we can tell what worked, and we can tell what's not working, and what we think we might want to change. And so that's the stage we're in now, and I just want to acknowledge the tremendous effort of the folks that I just mentioned, the curriculum department, of course, in gathering the resources, and our coaches for helping. And we do have several principals here this evening, and I'm sure if there are questions, they are available as well to answer questions. But thank you all for your support of this work, and we hope that this has given a sufficient overview of what the service is and how it's used in the day.
And we certainly hope that it reiterates our message of, because of the kids, like everything, all of these decisions. How many times did you hear people talk tonight about what the kids need, what children need, where they are, meeting them where they are, really getting to know the kids and providing them with the instruction that, that meets those needs. I've said to the board before, this is a tremendous place to work, and the folks who have been involved with all of this work are a big part of that. What makes this such a great place. Thank you all for anyone who was a part of this in the room tonight, but also a lot of other folks contributed to it as well, and everyone that Jen mentioned.
I just want to say thank you. I have a third grade son at Linwood, and I can say the MTSS program, I can't think of one negative thing to say about it. I think he's a COVID, first grade COVID year, and in kindergarten, and first grade, the hybrid year, and his reading skills were so behind because of COVID. And last year, the gains, not just because of his phenomenal teacher, Ms. Ravel, but also because of the MTSS program and the targeted intervention. I've been, when you said the I&E, I remember it was flex time. I've been around, it was flex, then it was I&E. And at first, when you hear that as a parent, I'm like, another acronym for, it's my third time with the different, but this has totally exceeded expectations. I really didn't put much thought in, I'll be honest, at first, just thought it was another program. But the gains he made last year, not just with his teacher, but also with the targeted intervention and MTSS have been tremendous. And I am so thankful. And going through all the steps here, the amount of work that goes into that is tremendous. And, I know the interventionists are specifically hired for that, but it really makes me appreciate the teachers, because it's not lost on me that now, let's say a third grade teacher in a district who has their 25 little homeroom children, and then they have, you switch from math, and now you're adding in a whole nother group the stress that puts on, and I hope we're all giving them the supports they need, because, that's learning potentially a lot more kids, a lot more responsibility on them. And obviously, it makes me appreciate his wonderful teacher even more, and all the teachers, because, these are times when you hear a lot of teachers burning out and this is an added responsibility for them, and I'm so grateful. So thank you for everything very much.
What I really like about this program is that, again, it's so individualized to our students. It just shows that we have all this data and we can use it in a lot of different ways, but we're actually using it to get to the individual person behind the data, right? And, I think that the way that maybe it was before, not recently maybe, but a long time ago, was you focus on who has the most needs sort of in that lowest quintile and who has the most needs in that highest quintile. And then everyone else just kind of moves ahead, right, in their regular class. But I think that it seems to me, this program is trying to focus on bringing every single student up from where they are, no matter where they are in that chart, and focusing on what they specifically need, having these smaller groups. I have a very shy child, and I know for certain that shy children just will simply not talk in a big classroom atmosphere. And when you get them in this smaller group, they just feel so much more comfortable. And it really does seem to be doing great things in our schools, and I appreciate so much how much effort, clearly by all of you and all of the teachers and every single person in the district that has had to do with this. It seems like a wonderful program, and I appreciate the really thorough review of it tonight.
Yeah, I also have an elementary schooler, so I hear a lot about MTSS, and it's all good stuff. And I do think the aspect of kind of like moving around to different classes and getting to know different teachers is important, and you know, different groups of students, and you know, that changes the dynamic. And I think it's really positive for our students to have that. And obviously mine is just, you know, one data point, but this is really comprehensive, and it's really great to see all the different ways that we can assess the students on a big picture, looking sort of at all the charts and graphs, but then also that you individually can kind of drill down and get them what they needed. Just a question, you know, I was going to ask a question about graphs, right? My question for you about these graphs, how early in the school year, I guess what I was wondering is can we use these kinds of assessments to assess summer learning loss and kind of see how, you know, get students ramped up as quickly as possible and kind of see where they're ending the year and where they're starting the next year? Is that?
We give it in the first, in weeks 2 to 4 approximately. And all map data shows learning loss. It's universal. They actually have, you know, the growth curve of the student, and it drops backwards every single summer on purpose, and that's what happens nationwide. But it does help to highlight students in particular that have a more significant summer learning loss. And it also highlights in a school district such as ours, we do have students that actually have summer gains. And it's kind of interesting to see that as well. So we do observe that, and it's our focus right away, you know, 4 to 6 weeks into the school year.
That's fantastic. And can you use these graphs like, you know, like we're looking at the current grade levels, but could you then compare that to next year? So the current first graders, next year's second graders, so you can kind of track overall progress and like, are the blue and green bars increasing over time for that grade as you track them through? Can you use it for that or not?
You can.
Okay.
I think, again, the most powerful result of this is to track the individual student. So when you have 5 data points on a student or 7 data points on a student, our goal is that those students continue to go up and up and up. And when you see a student that started in the red and now in the orange and then they creep into the yellow, those are the real celebrations. But yes, absolutely, we are looking at it macroly too, and just seeing overall how is the grade doing in every building.
You all knew that we were just going to sit here and have a graph conversation. We all knew that was coming. So, okay, thanks. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I think that one of the things that I appreciate is seeing the quotes from the students, because it highlights their own recognition of, hey, I'm getting better at this, or I understand now. And so I imagine for educators, it's amazing for you to see that growth, but then from the student, for them to feel that growth, that has to be much more inspiring for them to continue, and for them to recognize I'm capable of learning something new when I try a different way or I'm in a different group. And so just to experience that self-growth, I think it's very important for our students. So thank you.
It's been a while since I've spent time in an elementary classroom with my own kids, but I remember it being a really busy place. Kids coming in, adults coming in, different groups and all of this. And I like how this builds on you know, the work that I had seen years ago going on, but also makes it that this is just natural, right? Like there's not like, oh, okay, now those kids are getting, right? Like it's all, but everybody's getting the extra resources and help and support. And in terms of that, like equity and feeling like this is very routine and normal, and having that, I think, removes a barrier or a stigma to any of the additional supports, which is nice to highlight. And I do appreciate from this presentation the extent to which this is creative and, you know, being built and evaluated. And is there any point of reference that you can give? So MTSS is not a Haverford creation, right?
No.
It exists out
Great question.
right?
Yeah.
And so could you just put it in that context of kind of where it fits in like educational strategies?
Sure. MTSS is a fairly common strategy. If you've been in education a while, you will remember RTI, which was response to intervention, and then RTII, which was response to intervention and something else I can't remember. And then there's MTSS, which is now multi-tiered, essentially, response. So basically, MTSS is nationwide. In fact, one of the graphics I have in here is from Illinois, or Michigan, the Michigan State Department. And it's this concept that the majority, around 80% of your students will progress from their core instruction, and those are the kids you should see in the green and those trees that Sandy refers to. And then about 10 to 15% will respond with some additional intervention in, over and above what you get from the core. And then there are a very smaller percentage, maybe 5%, who are sort of those who you saw in the red that aren't responding even to the additional intervention, that need a third level or perhaps some testing for services. It's something, if you go, Google it, you'll find lots of different iterations of it. There are some principles that apply, including the screening, the diagnosing, the intervening, and the monitoring of progress. So those are sort of the essential elements of an MTSS program. And they are multi-system. They are not only about academics. So you will also see, as I mentioned, the behavioral, the social, emotional, and the academic as well. Go on PDE's website. It's one of their research-based strategies that you can use to use things like grant funding. And, our PATAN, which is our local Pennsylvania support group, also does lots of training on MTSS. So you'll see lots of districts with this program.
I think the piece that is unique, though, when Jen mentioned there are, elements to MTSS, such as assessment, the way in which you approach it, the materials that you use, the way you staff it, the way you set goals, that's unique to, within each system. And hopefully, when you leave tonight, you're leaving with a sense that this system has been approached very thoroughly within our district.
Any other comments or discussion? All right, so with appreciation for the very robust presentation and for everyone's dedication to being here till almost 9 o'clock, we have one more agenda item.
But we understand if those who were here for that presentation have their own items that they need to. Thank you all for being here.
We always
We
allow
appreciate
our
that.
littlest
Yes.
learners to leave. We can allow our teachers and support staff to leave as well.
Yes, and they've heard this before, so this next piece will not be new to any of the people who are heading out at this point. The final item on our agenda this evening is just really an overview. I actually mentioned this at our last Curriculum and Pupil Services Committee meeting, is just mentioning again the fact that we are ramping up homework at the elementary level where formal homework was described in our board policy. We are now at the point where we should have ramped. We are like on board. We're like getting on the highway at this point, back to assigning homework as a non-optional activity, particularly for the students in those intermediate grades of 3, 4, and 5, so that it meets what is in our current board policy. As I mentioned before, our board policy was improved in 2010. And, it hasn't changed, although practice, particularly over the COVID years, but, I can't say that it hadn't changed before that either. Practice had changed a little bit. And so we have recently sort of gotten everybody back on board with assigning non-optional homework according to the policy, which essentially states, in 3rd grade, you should have about 30 minutes of homework, and it should be in some particular areas of reinforcement, enrichment, creativity. And then by the time you get up to 6th grade, it's an hour. So it's gradually increasing about 10 minutes per grade of homework time. Teachers did inform students of this a couple of weeks ago, sent home some information to families about it, and then we've talked about it again just last week. It was at a curriculum meeting. What's everybody assigning for homework? How's that going? How are you holding kids accountable? What's working? What's not working? And one additional piece, we did ask teachers to ensure that particularly in math, because it comes up more in math, that a non-technology option is offered for the homework. So not that the homework is optional, but that the homework doesn't have to be getting on a screen. So you would probably see more math homework books coming home, and still have the option to do, the online if that's what works better for your child and your family.
Thanks. I'm sorry to keep talking at 9 o'clock. But I guess I have some questions about this. My first question is really, is all of that homework necessary for our students? And I know that it's in the board policy. I also know that it is from 2010, and policy committee hasn't reviewed it yet. But my real question is, are we doing that because it's a policy, or are we doing that because it's what's best for our students? And I don't want that to get lost here. I'm not an education researcher. I don't have a lot of background specifically in homework. My understanding is that in elementary school, it doesn't do a whole lot, and it burdens our students. I think an hour, trying to think of my 6th grader doing an hour of homework every night is insane to me, to be honest. And I guess my question is, for the whole board, do we think that it's the board's role to take our teachers' hands and say, I'm gonna assign you 30 minutes of homework, because that's our board's policy? And I would really like to hear from the teachers, from the curriculum administrators, on what they think works for our students with homework. And I'd like them to take a look at the policy, to be honest, and see if that's something that they find to be necessary. Like I said, I personally already think that it's inappropriate for the board to be putting numbers in to the teachers, and especially on such a uniform level. I think there are going to be times when a student has an hour of homework, and that's fair. But to say that it has to happen every day, again, seems inappropriate to me. So, I'd love to just hear before. It sounds like maybe some changes are in progress, but certainly before there's some sort of massive shift, I'd like to hear about the actual practice and what that means for our students and our staff.
Yeah, I'd like to echo that I would hate for us to have a number that we've come up with that then creates a burden on both the teachers and the children if it's not a clear educational purpose. Like, I don't want busy work to be created so that we can meet that marker of time. I would much rather see it be there's a very specific educational reason for this homework. Like you said, maybe one time a week there's a longer amount of time, but then maybe that, especially at the 3rd grade level, there's days that a kid can come home and play. Yep. And have that break for their brain. We also know that lots and lots of our students have a great deal of after-school activities. And so adding homework on top of that, I think, again, if it's educationally dedicated, I just would love to hear from the teachers what they feel about it.
So I'm someone who feels very strongly for the need for homework. I think Dr. Rushi and Ms. Saxa, this was in our schools when my son started in 2012, and I obviously know times change. I think the 30 minutes is just I don't think anyone was ever clocking. I mean, there were certain nights my kids might have 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. It was just something, a reinforcement, and parental involvement, which I think was very much lacking. And one thing that no study can refute is you can't help your child if you don't know what they're doing. So if you don't have any idea, except for the 7 math tests that come home a year, what your child's, the math test comes home, oh, you didn't do well. And obviously I know that if a child was failing, struggling, your teacher would have reached out. But, for me, that we had a drastic shift with COVID, which was completely understandable. I certainly didn't want, when I was sitting at a kitchen table with a 1st grader, any more work to be brought. I was already working with him all day at a table. I didn't need any homework because we were doing everything was homework at that point. But, these COVID little elementary school, the COVID kids, we'll call them, they're behind. And, I have the note here at our testing, the math PSA testing for 3rd through 8th grade was 41% basic or below basic. So a little extra reinforcement. I'm not saying we need to time them. I think the math homework, the book that comes home, our curriculum does provide a math workbook. The 2 pages that my son did tonight, and did it take him 10 minutes to do the test? It wasn't overwhelming, but it lets me know what he's doing and how to reinforce it as appropriate. And when he struggled, and that was one of the, I know some other parents approached administration, and I approached with them, I couldn't help my child if you don't know. And so a parent should know what is going on. I don't think we should have oppressive limits, and I don't think anyone should feel that they should be clocking in at a certain, some nights it will be a little bit more. Maybe some nights it takes 15 minutes instead of 10, and that's okay too. But I know I had never once felt, since being in this district, that we were oppressive with homework. And I believe the message that was so loud and clear for my oldest two's early years was, if something is taking you more than 20 minutes, if you stop, you just stop and put a little star, send it in, and then, it's kind of empowering and self-advocacy for a child to be like, I couldn't do this. I just didn't get this. And I think that's an important life skill. But it was always crystal clear to any parent that with my older children, you do not do something that takes you, if you don't get it, you just stop. No one wants any child to struggle. I also think it's important that we align with, considering that I think our test scores were terrible for the PSSEs, that, this is something in all surrounding school districts. Lower Merion is giving much more. I would like to see us have LA homework, not just reading randomly. It's what my older sons had, spelling, grammar, just a little. I don't think my children ever spent more than a half hour in elementary school on homework, barring some special assignment. It was never oppressive, and I respect, believe me, I am all over with travel, soccer, and track and all this, but to me, education is what we're here. I can't worry about other, that is why we're here. And a little bit, I think, is very important. It also teaches responsibility, but the parental involvement piece and not being able to help your child, to me, that will always trump any reason against homework.
I do want to chime in because I hear what everybody is saying, but I do want to say that I am an education researcher, and there's actually a lot of education research about the various effectiveness of homework on different aspects of student achievement and student outcomes. I did not have a lot of time to look into this, but I did grab a couple things in case you're wondering. A lot of the research is done on high school students, and most of the research done that I've seen so far on younger grades shows that there's not really any strong association between homework and academic achievement. At the high school level, there's some mixed evidence, but it seems like mostly it's related to math homework affecting math achievement. One study that I did find that I want to kind of quote a little bit here, and I'm happy to share this with anybody who wants it. This is like a very I didn't have time to do a deep dive, but one of the things that I hadn't thought about, but when I was kind of reading into this, and I think this is a really important point. This was studying elementary age students, not in the United States, but I think it's an interesting article nonetheless. But specifically looking by socioeconomic status of the student and their household. They found more precisely, pupils belonging to the upper part of the socioeconomic scale perform better when homework is given, but pupils from the lowest part are unaffected. At the same time, more disadvantaged children get less help from their parents with homework. Therefore, homework can amplify existing inequalities because of the home inputs. So that is something, I think it's awesome that you can work with your child and help them with their homework, but I do worry that there are kids in our district who their parents don't have that time, that capability, and I do worry that by assigning lots of homework outside of school, and if especially at the younger grades where parental oversight really is involved, that's going to actually detract from all of the good stuff that we're doing with MTSS. So I understand everybody's perspective, but I think whatever conversation we have and whatever decisions we make need to be grounded in research, in best practices. And I completely agree. We need to hear from the teachers because we have some amazing educators. We heard from both of our curriculum coordinators tonight. This is what they're trained to do. And I also feel like I'm also an educator, and I would feel very uncomfortable if my board of trustees said to me, you have to assign your college students this much homework every night. Like, I don't necessarily feel like that is my role as a board member to tell the teachers how much homework they have to give. So I'm not saying that homework is not important, but I'm thinking that there's a lot of considerations here. And I definitely think a review of the policy and hearing from our instructors, and then keeping in mind our goals of equity and inclusion as well are important.
I mean, I do think I understand, like, with my older two children, I can honestly say, I don't think I ever really helped. I would say, did you do your homework? Give them their snack. I might check that it was done. I'm sure there was a time I helped them. I'm sure there had to have been. I mean, the years blur. It was a long time ago when they were that age. For my youngest, yes, I do have to help him a lot. It's not a shocker, COVID. It is where we're at. But to me, to say that because someone can help, I mean, truthfully, to me, that would be an advocacy piece for a child. Homework is not as meant to be, the child should be doing it on their own, but to be able to go to a teacher and say, I can't do something, I think is an important life skill. I have heard teachers say in the district that the current third graders, they were talking about like math facts. Back in the day when my older two were at Linwood, second grade, they were fluent in multiplication. There was, you had to do 10 minutes of a program called Reflex Math each night that drilled you on multiplication facts. And I believe Dr. Nesbitt said when he was here, it's something about impossible to support someone who doesn't know multiplication facts in fourth grade when you're doing fractions. And a third grade teacher in the district was saying to me how their particular team at their particular elementary school was saying that this current third grade is so behind on that, and that they wanted to assign homework because multiplication, that is something, it's just drill. I mean, I had a nun and I had to write it out. I didn't have a fun reflex math program, but their hands were, and I've dealt with this with Dr. Rushi, they were told they were not allowed to assign homework. So, in that sense, that was administration telling, and that was a message received across all 5 elementary schools, because I did my research and I checked, they were not allowed back in the fall to assign math homework. And so, I understand you want to listen to the teachers' needs as well, but they were having needs where they were seeing deficiencies, and some things do need to be, but I will say I would never want to hamper a parent who does want to help their child. I think that would not be right.
I do want to kind of echo some of the points that have already been made. Educational psychology was a course that I taught often. So I've read lots of research papers specific to this. It's a favorite topic of students. Educational psychology, which is interesting, was an elective for psychology students, but a requirement for the teacher education department. So my class was filled with young, maybe even now, educators that are currently teaching, particularly elementary and middle school age students. I think it's absolutely imperative that we're looking at the data and the research that supports the correlation between homework and its effectiveness. And effectiveness can be a lot of different things for different people. Is it effective with memorization? Probably so, absolutely. At a high school level, can it be effective with critical thinking skills and research? Absolutely. At elementary level, will it have those same types of effectiveness? Probably not. One of the things that I appreciated about tonight's presentation that we talked about individual needs of students. And so we want to make sure that as we are looking at policies and curriculums and programs, that we are consistent with that approach. And that's one of the things that I think that we do at the school district, and I don't want that to be lost with this particular policy or shift or change. Change is okay. We're not going back to pre-COVID ever. That can't even be a goal. I think that it's very, very important for us to be consistent with meeting the needs of our children today, supporting those families that may not be able to bridge the gap. My children are fortunate enough to have parents and grandparents that are college graduates, parents that are graduates from different programs. Everyone's household is not made up that way. And so, absolutely, I appreciate the student being able to go to the teacher and say, hey, I need help. But I also know there's a student who's embarrassed to say, hey, I can't do this. Just as there is a parent who's embarrassed to say, and I also can't help them. So I want to make sure that we are consistent with our goals for the district, supporting our teachers, supporting our families, and protecting the mission and values that we hold true to us.
Thank you. I am going to just note the time. It's 9:15.
Yeah.
I think there will be more opportunities to discuss this.
What I'd like to do, if it's okay, just to have some time for Jen and I to sort of process, debrief what we heard tonight, share that with the folks in the curriculum department, and then let you know how we'd like to approach everything that we've heard tonight. If that's okay. I don't want to say right now what, like, oh, we'll do this or we'll do that.
I would like to have them take a look at that policy.
So it is policy 130. I just pulled it up, and that seems like one that warrants an update or a review by the policy committee.
Yeah, I would think after it's reviewed by the staff and the administration, right? And we have a recommendation and we have sort of a path forward. Then after that point, I would love for it to go to the policy committee and have a discussion of how do we make this policy reflect the current practice, reflect where we want it to be, reflect where we want it to go.
And how do we hear from the teachers? That's like, I'm trying, like, how does that?
If you hear nothing else coming from me, that's what I want to hear. Yes, exactly. Thank you.
And I did just want to kind of enter into the record. I know Ms. Vitale commented on the district's scores for math and not a favorable light, but just based on tonight's presentation, the math map takeaways, the first bullet point is district-wide third grade is doing particularly well. So there are lots of different data points.
40, Linwood, it was 48% below 60%. I didn't, but okay.
Right, I think there's lots of different
Lot of
ways to
data.
slice
Yeah, lots of
data.
different
There's
ways
lots
that
of
you can
different
slice
data
data.
points,
I know
but
that. I
didn't
did
want to
research
leave
classes.
the meeting with that being the context when the presentation cited some strength in third grade and in other areas, so.
In math.
Yeah. So we can conclude the
Is there any
homework
public
discussion.
comment?
And then I was going to say, there is one more topic on our agenda is the opportunity for public comment, but I think we have cleared the room.
Yes, everyone is left.
More on all these topics, and again, just so much appreciation to the staff.
Great job,
And
really great
everyone
job.
who put together the really thorough and thoughtful presentations. And I know these meetings don't get as much attention, but this is really where so much of the good stuff is and the work of the district. And so I do hope more people tune in, or when we give the report on what good work is happening in our counseling and in MTSS, that gets out, because
It's why we're here.
that's why we're here.
It's why we exist.
The board at work.
Right. So yes, thanks to everyone for a really robust presentation and insight into some great programs that our district offers. And with that, our business for tonight is concluded, and we can adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.